I am a 33-year-old guy from Ohio, and for most of my life I have carried an unofficial title that no one voted on but everyone enforced, the responsible one. Not the favorite child, not the shining star, not the person who gets bragged about at holiday parties. That honor goes eternally and unquestioningly to my cousin Tiffany, who is 28, who could knock over a convenience store with a glittery handbag and somehow my grandmother would still call her a misunderstood angel. But me? No. I was the designated lifter, fixer, problem solver, call at any hour of the night guy. If a smoke alarm beeped once, even if it was just a low battery warning, someone dialed me before they even thought of checking the battery themselves. I grew up being told that being responsible was a compliment, but as an adult I realized it was also a job nobody pays you for. I was never resentful about helping my parents with their endless stream of tech emergencies. I became the veteran of situations like, your mother said quietly that she thinks her laptop has been taken over by shadow criminals because a pop-up told her so, or, your father insists that his phone is deleting his contacts on its own even though he very clearly tapped the wrong setting. I was the family insurance policy without a premium. I moved out when I was 20, mostly because I wanted peace, independence, and a break from being a household utility. I rented a small apartment for several years. It was one bedroom, just enough space for a desk, a bed, and my sanity. I worked in IT for a manufacturing company, made intelligent choices with money, tracked every expense down to the last cent, and stored everything in spreadsheets that my friends teased me about. They joked that if the world ended and society collapsed, I would still have a neatly formatted financial history to hand to invading aliens. But those spreadsheets were my compass, and they guided me toward one dream that I held on to for years, owning a house. Not a massive dream home, not a luxurious showpiece, just a normal, quiet, solid place where every wall, every squeaky floorboard, every decision was mine. After 10 years of saving, budgeting, repairing broken appliances for relatives, and never missing a bill, I finally reached the moment in March of this year that felt unreal. I bought a 3-bedroom brick house at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac for $150,000. I put down $40,000 in cash. I renovated the kitchen with my own 2 hands, learning how to tile backsplashes by watching videos late at night and cursing every time I misaligned a tile. I installed a smart home system that ran smoother than anything my parents have ever touched. Every corner of that house carried a piece of me. When I signed the final papers and stood in the empty living room, the sound of my own footsteps echoing across freshly refinished floors, I felt a pride so deep that I could not even explain it to anyone. And I told no one. It was not out of secrecy or weirdness. It was because for once in my life I wanted something that was just mine until I chose to reveal it. I wanted to walk into a family dinner, put my keys on the table, and say, guess what? I did something big. No expectations, no planning committees disguised as relatives, no immediate assumptions about how I was going to convert my home into a family hospice center. But apparently, fate must have overheard the plan and decided to throw the blueprint into a woodchipper. Last Sunday, we gathered for my father's 60th birthday. It was a full house, my parents, my Aunt Linda, my Uncle Mike, my grandmother Ruth, and of course Tiffany and her 2 children, 8-year-old Dawson and 6-year-old Ellie. I like those kids. They are loud, sticky, and curious, but they mean well. Tiffany herself has been struggling financially for a long time. She goes through jobs the way some people go through towels at a swimming pool. Her ex vanished years ago, leaving her with bills, stress, and 2 children who constantly outgrow their shoes. She rents a cramped 2-bedroom apartment that looks like it stopped updating itself around the time builders were still excited about avocado green bathroom tiles. She pays $1,450 a month for that place, which feels like a crime in itself. We sat around the dinner table passing mashed potatoes and roasted chicken when my Uncle Mike, who had already had 2 glasses of cheap wine and gets bold whenever he swallows fermented grapes, clapped his hands loudly and said, well, now that our boy here bought a new house, it is good that Tiffany and the kids will not have to rent anymore. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My brain did not even process the sentence at first. It simply echoed in my skull like someone had shouted into a canyon. Then I looked around the table, expecting confusion, or a few people asking what he was talking about, or at least one person glancing my direction. Instead, everyone nodded with warm, pleased smiles as if this had been discussed, finalized, notarized, and celebrated long before I arrived. My grandmother said in her gentle voice, "That is such a thoughtful thing you are doing, dear. My mother beamed at me as if I had just announced I was donating a kidney to everyone present. My father patted my shoulder proudly. Tiffany looked emotional, and not genuinely emotional either, but the theatrical type of emotional reserved for daytime television. The most bizarre part was that no one, not a single person at that table, turned to me for confirmation. It was as if my life choices were a community project and I was simply the one paying the bills. Tiffany casually said while helping herself to green beans, "It will be so good for the kids to finally have their own rooms. Dawson can take the biggest one. Ellie wants a purple room, so I can paint it when we move in." I blinked very slowly. I put my fork down. I breathed in through my nose. Then I said in a calm, steady voice, "I am sorry." "Who said anything about anyone living with me?" The room fell silent in an instant. I swear I could almost hear my grandmother's pacemaker make a confused beep of disapproval. Uncle Mike let out an uncomfortable laugh and waved his hand like I was joking when he said, "Oh come on, we all know you want to help family. You have the space. You are single. You do not need 3 bedrooms." I responded, "Correct. I do not need 3 bedrooms. Because I bought them. For me." The silence deepened and shifted, becoming a heavier, sharper thing, the kind that makes even the air feel judgmental. My mother muttered quietly but firmly, "This is not the time to be selfish." That was the moment something inside me clicked. Not dramatically, not like a thunderstorm or a shouted argument, but a clean, precise click like someone closing a small metal latch inside my head. I leaned back in my chair slowly, looked around at all of them, and let the words form clearly before I spoke. I said, "I actually did not tell anyone about the house because I wanted to surprise you all. But clearly the surprise is on me, because none of you seem to know anything about my life. And that is fine. Truly. But here is something else you do not know, I am absolutely not letting anyone move into my home. Not temporarily. Not until Tiffany gets back on her feet. Not for a week. Not for a night. Not even for a short nap." Tiffany's face twisted with shock, like I had betrayed her deeply and personally. Her voice rose as she shouted, "You do not care about family." I answered, "Family does not volunteer other people's houses without asking." My Uncle Mike tried to interrupt with, "Well, if family cannot rely on you," but I cut him off by saying, "They can rely on me to tell them the truth. And honestly, all of you need to stop planning my life as if it is your personal project. You assumed my home was available for use without asking me once. You saw something I worked 10 years for and decided it belonged to the family in general. That is not helping. That is entitlement." My father laughed quietly, which made my mother turn toward him with a glare sharp enough to remove wallpaper. Tiffany stood up, her chair scraping the floor, and stormed out of the dining room with her children trailing behind her. The rest of the night dissolved into stiff, awkward small talk that no one enjoyed. But I did not back down. Not this time. I love them, but I am no longer going to be the default solution for every crisis, emergency, or impulsive decision they make. I walked out of that dinner knowing one truth more clearly than ever: I deserve to own something that is mine, without being guilted into surrendering it. But I'm done being the default doormat. The fallout from that dinner did not hit all at once. It rolled in gradually, like a slow-moving storm that pretends it is harmless until you realize the sky has turned the color of old dishwater and something is about to snap. I thought I would get a cooling-off period, a few quiet days before the inevitable complaints trickled in. I underestimated my cousin's talent for theatrics and social media warfare. 2 days after the dinner, while I was at work quietly fixing a malfunctioning barcode scanner and pretending not to hear my coworker complain that the office coffee tasted like dirt that went to college, my phone buzzed 12 times in a row. That number only happens when someone has died or when someone in my family has discovered a new misuse of Facebook. Since everyone was still alive, I had a sinking feeling the second option had arrived. Tiffany had posted what can only be described as a heartfelt manifesto, written in 3 different fonts, plastered on top of a faded sunset stock photo that looked like it was stolen from an inspirational calendar no one bought. She started her essay with an emotional call-out claiming she had been betrayed by blood, and she wrote that the people who should have supported her abandoned her when she needed them most. It continued with a line that made me snort so loudly that my coworker popped his head over our cubicle wall like a confused prairie dog. She said she had been left homeless by greed. Homeless. As in lacking a home. As in owning no home. As in her apartment, the same overpriced, peeling paint place she has lived in for years, still very much having her name on the lease, the keys in her purse, and the rent due on the first. Her definition of homeless seemed flexible enough to include any minor inconvenience, such as being told no for the first time in her adult life. She added another dramatic flourish about how she had reached out for love and stability, only to be rejected by someone who had 3 empty bedrooms while my children sleep cramped. She did not mention that those children sleep cramped because she transformed the second bedroom in her apartment into a personal storage pit filled with unopened online purchases she bought during late-night scrolling sessions. Boxes of novelty humidifiers shaped like mushrooms, bags of self-help journals she never writes in, and enough cheap plastic toys to fill an entire flea market gather dust while her kids share a bunk bed. But in her world, she was a tragic heroine battling the cruelty of heartless relatives. The most entertaining part was not even the post itself. It was the comments section, which erupted like a volcanic pity party. People I have never met wrote that I should be ashamed. One woman claimed she prayed that I would see the harm I had done to innocent children. Another said she did not understand how someone with a home could throw family onto the street. A man with a profile picture of himself flexing in a gym mirror demanded to know why I thought I was better than a struggling mother. According to these strangers, I was a villain in a story they invented 5 seconds earlier. They assumed she had already lived with me and that I had thrown her and her children out into the cold like a Dickensian landlord. I stared at the post, reread it twice, took a sip of water, and felt a slow, creeping amusement settle over me. She had created an entire fictional universe in which she was the wrong protagonist and I was the greedy antagonist hoarding empty rooms like a dragon sleeps on gold. The sheer audacity almost impressed me. Instead of writing an essay of my own or starting a digital war, I posted a single, calm comment. I wrote that I had offered to help Tiffany find a cheaper rental and assist with budgeting, but that moving into my house had never been discussed with me. I added that people should ask before volunteering other people's homes. I thought the comment was fair, neutral, factual, and measured. It did not call her out. It did not shame her. It simply inserted reality into a conversation drowning in melodrama. I hit post, put my phone down, and went back to work. By the time I checked again, the comment had vanished. Tiffany deleted my comment in under 5 minutes. The Facebook chaos simmered for about 48 hours before the situation escalated in a new direction. I thought the storm might die down, or at least drift away into the background noise of everyone's daily lives, but that was wishful thinking. Instead, the gossip evaporated online and condensed in the real world, landing right on my doorstep in the form of my parents, who showed up without warning on a quiet Thursday evening. I heard the knock while I was unpacking a set of wall shelves I planned to mount in my office. At first, I assumed it was a package. When I opened the door and saw my mother already halfway across my lawn with the purposeful stride of a woman ready to perform an audit, I knew the conversation had arrived whether I liked it or not. She marched past me into the house with the grandeur of a royal inspector, her eyes sweeping across the living room as if she expected to find hidden treasure or a scandal tucked behind the furniture. My father followed behind her, already wearing the expression of a man who knew he was outnumbered. My mother began with polite comments, but they were the polite comments of someone preparing to deliver a verdict. She stepped deeper into the house, turning slowly, her gaze drifting upward to the high ceilings and across the open floor plan. She murmured that the rooms were so big, the hallways so open, the layout so airy, and then she added with a pointed sigh that it was such a shame to have so much unused space. She said the word and used the way people say mold or infestation. She moved from room to room like she was conducting a home inspection with a hidden agenda. Every time she paused, she gestured dramatically at something. She pointed out that the guest room had a bed that had never been slept in. She pointed out that the second guest room had nothing but a dresser and a rug. She inspected my office with pursed lips, as if the sight of a desk and computer deeply offended her. She asked if I truly needed an office, and I told her that yes, it was where I worked. She scanned the shelves as though she expected them to be filled with excuses instead of books. She stepped into the hallway and asked if I actually needed a guest room. I told her that yes, I needed one for guests. She replied that family were guests, and I answered that uninvited family were not. The look she gave me was a mix of surprise and disapproval, like I had violated a sacred rule she assumed I agreed to at birth. The house felt different with her walking through it, not because the walls had changed but because her expectations filled the space like a fog. I had bought this home with pride and excitement, and now she was verbally rearranging it as if she were preparing a property for public use. It became very clear that my family did not see my house as my accomplishment. They saw it as a resource they should have access to whenever they wanted. They were not celebrating that I succeeded. They were irritated that I did not immediately open the doors for their convenience. It all crystallized when she sighed, folded her arms, and said that I had always helped before and she did not understand why I was changing now. That was the moment everything snapped into focus. It was not about gratitude or appreciation. It was about habit. They had grown used to the version of me who said yes automatically, and now they were frustrated that I had updated my settings. After completing her tour, she stepped back into the living room and began listing ways the space could be used if I would just be a little more generous. I listened quietly, no longer angry but something deeper and calmer, the kind of clarity that arrives when you finally see a pattern that was there all along. She talked about family obligations, moral duty, and doing the right thing. I stood my ground, not raising my voice, not arguing, just holding the line with the quiet certainty that the right choice was not the same as the convenient choice. My father remained silent during most of this, trailing behind us with the resigned patience of a man attending a meeting he never agreed to join. When my mother finally stepped outside to answer a phone call from my aunt, my father stayed back in the hallway with me. He glanced toward the door to make sure she was out of earshot, then lowered his voice and leaned in slightly. He whispered that he was proud of me and that I should not let them guilt me. It was such a small sentence, spoken quietly enough that it felt like a secret, but it landed harder than any speech. For a moment I felt something tighten in my chest, a mix of relief and gratitude that caught me off guard. I swear I almost cried. The house felt different in a way I had trouble explaining. It was still mine, still the place I had worked for, still the space I built and paid for, but the mental image of my mother wandering through it like a disappointed real estate agent lingered in the corners of my mind. It made me more aware of the boundaries I had finally drawn, and more determined to protect them. I fully expected the next wave of drama to come from Tiffany. She had been quiet since the Facebook spectacle, which usually meant she was preparing something dramatic or searching the internet for inspirational quotes to weaponize. I paced a little too much, checked my phone a little too often, and braced myself for a fresh blast of guilt. I imagined half a dozen possible messages from her, all of them unfriendly, all of them demanding, all of them dripping with hurt feelings and selective memory. So when my phone buzzed on a Tuesday morning with her name on the screen, I took a slow breath before opening it. I prepared for the worst. What I did not expect was a wall of text that did not sound like Tiffany at all. It was careful, thoughtful, stripped of theatrics. She wrote that she had spent several days thinking about everything that happened. She said she realized she had been relying on me because everyone else in the family always insisted I would say yes. She admitted she never asked because she assumed she deserved the help more, and that she had built an expectation around that assumption without considering how unfair it was. She said she had grown used to treating me as the solution to her problems, not because she wanted to take advantage of me, but because she had convinced herself I would always pick up the slack. I read the message twice, then a third time, feeling the tension in my shoulders slowly shift into something else. She continued by saying she was applying for better jobs and had scheduled a meeting with a financial counselor at a local community center. Then she wrote that she was not asking to live with me. She just hoped we were okay. The sincerity hit me unexpectedly. It was the first time in years she had taken responsibility without adding a side dish of guilt or tears. I told her we could meet for coffee the next day. She agreed within minutes. We met at a small cafe near her apartment. She walked in looking tired in a way that went deeper than simple exhaustion. It was the kind of tired that comes from realizing you have to rebuild parts of your life and cannot outsource it to anyone else this time. She sat down across from me with her shoulders slightly hunched, her hands wrapped around her mug like she needed the warmth to steady herself. The conversation started slow, but it unfolded naturally. She told me that reading the comments on her own Facebook post made her cringe once the emotional haze cleared. She said she had not deleted the post yet because she felt embarrassed to admit she had exaggerated the situation. She talked about her kids, her bills, her fear of falling behind again. She talked about how the idea of someone else solving her problems had become a trap she did not even realize she was sitting in. I listened. I did not try to fix everything. That was the old habit she expected from me, and it was the habit I was working to break. I simply offered what I could: guidance, structure, support without sacrifice. I told her I would help her look at her budget, sort out unnecessary expenses, find a cheaper rental that fit her income, and keep her grounded while she made decisions for herself. She nodded gratefully, not as someone accepting a gift, but as someone accepting responsibility with help on the sidelines. For the first time in a long time, the conversation felt honest instead of manipulative. When we finished our coffee, she mentioned with a tired smile that Uncle Mike still believed I was joking about not letting her move into my house. She said he had told half the family that I was only bluffing because I was embarrassed in the moment. I told her that if he wanted to test that theory, he was welcome to bring a sleeping bag and see how quickly the smart lock changed codes. She burst into laughter at that, a full, genuine laugh that rolled out of her like she had been holding it back for years. It was the first real laugh we had shared in a long time, and it made the tension between us crack and break in a way I did not expect. We ended the night with a small understanding between us. Not a promise, not a grand resolution, but a shared realization that things had to change and could change without resentment. She walked to her car looking a little lighter than when she arrived. As for me, I drove home feeling something I had not felt in weeks, peace. The house greeted me with its warm lighting and quiet rooms, reminding me that this space was mine not because I won an argument but because I earned it. I walked through every room with a different kind of pride, not the pride of ownership alone, but the pride of someone who finally learned to defend himself without burning bridges. Boundaries were set. Lessons were learned. Relationships were adjusting instead of collapsing. And the house remained mine, fully and unquestionably mine. It felt powerful to stand inside a home my adult self worked for, saved for, fought for. It felt even more powerful knowing that the version of me from years ago would look at all of this and feel proud, not just of the house, but of the person living in it.